We have a series of 4 speakers, and I'm going to introduce them as they come on and before they speak. They're each going to talk about something slightly different about the programme for preparing for the European job market. And I'd like to start with Professor Árpád Ábrahám, who's at the University of Bristol. And his research is on the distributional impact of tax and transfer policies, designing insurance policies, bankruptcy, sovereign bankruptcies, and risk sharing at the supranational institutions. And he's going to open up with a discussion of, as a recruiter, what are we looking for? So Árpád is one of the recruiters at the University of Bristol, so he's talking, I think, a lot from his own experience of what we are looking for. And this is a very important starting point, really, for thinking about how you make your application processes, to think about it from our point of view, as it were, the recruiters. So I'd like to hand over to Árpád for the first set of commentaries.
Thank you very much, Mary, for introducing me, and thank you very much for everybody to come. And the job market is a very stressful period, but it's a very important period, but it could be a very rewarding period, because this is going to be a time when a lot of people are going to look with a lot of interest at your work, and then you should also appreciate that. So what I'm going to talk, I had many students in the job market in the last 20 years. I just counted it. There were 45, and I was also on the other side in the last 5 years, every year in Bristol. So my topic is, what are we looking for when we are looking for a junior colleague? And obviously, it's a university. So what we do in a university, we do research, we do teaching. So we are looking for people who are excellent in research, who would be very useful for our teaching activities. But we are also looking for colleagues, and you shouldn't be underestimated. We are looking for colleagues who we are going to teach together with, we are going to advise students together, or we're just going to have a coffee in every afternoon together. So it's very important, all this aspect. And somehow, how we design the job market interviews is kind of trying to test whether how you are able to contribute as a researcher, as a teacher, and as a colleague. So I here put in these slides in red, in my opinion, the 4 type of characteristics which we are looking for in a candidate. We look for creativity. How we can check creativity? Why creativity is important? Because research is about innovation. You have to develop new ideas, and creativity is one of the key elements of how to do research well. So how we do it in the interview, in the job market interview, we are going to talk a lot about your job market paper, and we try to understand what is the innovative idea, how to come to the innovative idea, and how this innovative idea is going to continue in your further research agenda. Second thing we are looking for is productivity. We would like you to be able to produce research throughout your career, and how we can check this at this early stage. We check how many drafts you finished. So if you have a draft which is close to be finished, make sure that it's on your website, and we can say, oh, there is a finished draft. Not only the job market paper, there is another paper. We're also going to ask you about the pipeline of your ideas. What other ideas you have, just to be able to predict your productivity, that you will be able to produce excellent research throughout time, and there we'll be able to give you tenure, or kind of promote you to a higher rank later. What else are we looking for? We are looking for skills, and I put here technical skills in quotes, because technical depends on the field. In macroeconomics, it should be quantitative modeling, computational skills. In applied micro, it could be empirical skills. But this is important because we want to increase in our school the amount of skills we can offer to advise students, or in our research groups, we may need some skills which we don't have, and it would be good to complete our research group with these skills. How we can check your technical skills? Again, we will ask you about your job market paper, and we are going to go some detail here and there to figure out how deep, how much you are at the frontier of the research in your area. Last but not least, and very importantly, we are looking for communication skills. Why are they important? They are important, of course, because the first 3 points, you need good communication skills to convey this in half an hour. All your creativity, productivity, and skills. importantly for teaching, you don't have a lot of experience of teaching yet because you are just finishing your PhD. Communication skills are a very good signal about your teaching skills. And also we are looking for colleagues. Good colleagues are the ones which we are easy to communicate with about the research and in general. So the whole interview is some extent testing your communication skills. So these are the skills what we are looking for. And you need to be able to show during this 25 minutes of an interview how you can deliver on these dimensions. How we put together the panel? We are interviewing usually many people in different fields or different subfields. So the interviewing panel, which is between 2 and 4 people, has diverse background. One of them, in a typical interview, read the paper, at least significant parts of the paper. So you should expect that somebody will know a lot about your paper. But the rest may know almost nothing about your paper, may have only time to check whether you are from the University of Exeter or the University of Bristol, but not much more. The really difficult task of an interview, you should keep everybody on board for the most part of the interview. So you should find a way to explain your field and the particular innovation of your paper to a group of people, which some of them understands more than others, and they have to be all engaged and involved in understanding it. So that's one other thing. The other thing which is we are always find encouraging if you see that the candidate is prepared about our university. How can you show that? You can show what natural synergies you may have. That I'm a macroeconomist, and we have X and Y in your department working on similar research agenda, and we can talk. Or I think I could be really bridging between these two groups because I can talk to this and that. This we find very useful because we need to evaluate somewhere. When I met colleagues, we have to evaluate your potential value added to our school. Finally, actually, I'm going to finish before my time. Do not prepare your talk for a particular individual in the panel for many reasons, because what I said before, you have to convince the whole panel typically that you are one of the persons who have all these characteristics, what they are looking for. And if you really prepare an interview for one person, go into the details, the other ones will not find it very exciting, the interview. More importantly, panels change. There are many things happens in the job market, and even if some universities will tell you that you are going to be interviewed by X, Y, and Z, it may not be the case at the end. Somebody else will show up, and then you have to just adjust to that. So better to have the same general message to everybody. Of course, you can adjust a little bit here and there, but not try to cater your whole interview to one particular person. And I will actually finish here, and I'm going to be very happy to answer questions either now or later, but there will be many of the potential questions you have maybe addressed in the next few presentations.
Thank you very much, Árpád. And that leads me to, of course, the point, please do ask questions and please put them in the chat, and then we'll be able to pick up our various people who are talking today. We'll be able to pick up particular ones. But as Árpád says, your questions may be answered in the next few talks. So hold on, because you might find the answer next. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce our second talker, Apurav Bhatiya, the University of Birmingham, which is how to prepare for the virtual interview, which I think was a good setup from Árpád there. Apurav is an assistant professor in economics at the University of Birmingham. His research focuses on political economy, development economics, and migration, and he's affiliated with JPAL as an invited researcher and with Cage at Warwick. And so very much welcome, Apurav, to make your contribution. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, for the introduction. Can I have the next slide?
Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, so I was on the junior market in 2021-22 academic year to get a job. And then I was on the hiring side in the last academic year, 23-24. So I've seen both sides of the market, and what I'm telling you is coming from both combination of both two sets of experiences. So when you go into the virtual interview setup in December, what's going to happen? So just a background that if any university has one open position where they want to fill up a junior candidate, For that one position, they would do up to 5 flyouts. They could do 3, they could do 4, they could do 5. And for each of the flyouts, they'll actually try to have at least 3 virtual interviews. So in total, you can expect up to 15 virtual interviews. So if at your favorite place you want to get a job and you have an interview there, remember that you're competing with around 15 other candidates who could be from the same research area or different research areas as well. They could be postdocs and they could be other candidates who are just finishing up their PhDs like you. So this is your competitive pool, and your objective right now is to get the flyout and proceed to the next stage. But remember, what is the objective of the hiring panel? Their objective right now is to filter out candidates who are just not employable. The panel is almost making a discussion after the interview that this person should be employable, that if they come for the flyout and hopefully everything goes well, we should be in a position to offer them a job. So you have to really convince the panel for everything that you're doing as a candidate, from your job market paper to other research papers to your pipeline to your teaching and for other questions around admin and why you want to join. So make sure you're hitting all those things well in the interview, because if you do your interview well, then you're high chance that you will get a flyout as well. So how to prepare for the virtual interview? The best advice would be to do a lot of mock interviews. So try to do mock interviews with your university, ask your supervisors for mock interviews, ask other faculty members in your department for mock interviews. Try to record your mock interviews as well. You will have a set of questions that are generally going to be asked, and record yourself and try to make sure that you're answering them well without fumbling. Basic questions like how do you introduce yourself? What is your job market paper about? Why do you want to join this university, and so on. After doing a lot of mock interviews, make sure you also do a lot of technical tests, because maybe you're just practicing everything with Zoom, but your actual virtual interview is happening on Teams or on Skype. And at the last moment, you don't want to make mistakes with technical things. So make sure you're able to record yourself giving an interview on different platforms: Teams, Zoom, Skype, or if there's something else that you can think of. In terms of scheduling the interviews, try to spread out your interviews during the 4 days as much as possible. If you'll probably have some set of places where you're really keen to go, and make sure you don't put an interview for that place very early in the day or very late in the day. Try to put that somewhere in the middle. Don't try to pack too much your schedule. You will also be tired, and it gets reflected in the interview also if you are tired. Next, you're prepared and you're going into the interview now. The interview will last for about 25 to 30 minutes, and the setup will be something as follows. It goes in these 5 steps. Step 1, the panel will come up to 4 members. They will come and introduce themselves. They'll say what their names are, what they do, and they will ask you then to introduce yourself and talk about the job market paper. So you should be just pitch perfect about this when you give your introduction and you go into your job market paper. When you talk about your job market paper, remember that when you start talking about it, you have to follow the onion structure. That in the first minute, you talk about the motivation, research question, empirical strategy, and main result. And then you unpack another layer and go for the next 5 minutes of your job market paper spiel, where you unpack further the motivation, the research question, go into the details of econometric strategy, go into the details of contribution to literature, go into the details of your results. And then you follow another 10 minutes of what you can say about your job market paper, go more into mechanisms, go more into the contribution to literature, and so on. So it should follow the structure and be ready for interruptions at any time, and be ready to go back to your spiel of this onion structure once someone has interrupted you and asked you a question as well. Broadly, when they ask you about your job market paper, they might be keen to ask you something around the paper as well. Where do you want to target the paper? Where will you send it? Which journals you'll send it? Who do you think your potential referees could be? Or they could go into other research papers as well and ask about the same structure. So for all papers for which you have a draft on your website, you should have the spiel ready in the onion structure. 1 minute, 5 minute, 10 minute for all papers, it should be ready with you. Once the discussion around research is done, there would be some discussions around teaching, experience, and preferences. So mostly they would be keen to understand what past experience you have with the teaching, whether you have done actual lectures or you have just done small group seminars, and so on. And broadly, for your favorite course, they might ask you, how would the syllabus look like? What would be the main topics you would cover? What are the seminal books or papers that you will refer to? Maybe something on the teaching style. How do you want to teach? Will you use some online survey tools as a part of your teaching? Have you done that? How would you think about assessments of a particular module? So you should be ready to talk about at least one or two courses which are in your field in this way broadly, and that would be a part of your teaching experience and what you have done so far. Lastly, they would ask you, why do you want to join us? And that's a very important question. And you have to answer this question taking into account the fit with the department, how your research is aligned with other faculty members who are doing research, what are the various research groups or research centers in the university where you could also contribute to applying for grants, being a part of the research group, and so on. So where are your research aligned? And broadly, if your research is aligned with, let's say, at least two groups, that increases your chance that you will be a good colleague and you'll be able to contribute to the department. And lastly, it's also important that if you have certain location preferences due to personal reasons or other reasons, please specify them, because it really helps the panel as well in deciding who is the person who has come, who will take up that job. And they want to make sure that they go from this stage to the flyout stage, whether you should be going or not. And anything that you can say and impress the panel is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Apurav. That's really helpful. It's a great covering, and I love the onion structure notion, which I haven't seen before, but it's really good. Okay, so now our third speaker is going to be Dr. Joerg Weber from the University of Exeter, who's a behavioural economist researching on household finance, household choices, preferences. He's at the Exeter Business School. I think it's quite useful to have one of our people from business school, because business schools have take so many economists now. And he's also director of research, and so on the for economics, and he's the member of the school's recruitment committee. So he's very useful for that, and also on the REF submission. So lots of different background points which are going to be useful. He's going to talk about the application package that you need to create, and the flyout aspect of this, which we covered to some extent, but I think there are other things that can be said. So, Maria, if we can move the slide on, and I'll turn over the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for the introduction. So, as Mary said, my name is Joerg Weber. I'm in the Department of Economics in the Business School, and as Director of Research, I've been a senior member of the recruitment committee now for several years, and have seen hundreds of applications, as well as participated in many, many interviews. So I want to give you kind of a perspective of what I look for in the application pack, and then you can draw your own conclusions, what could be the best way to structure it. And for often a question that is asked is, which part of the application pack is the most important? And the answer is, they're all important. Otherwise, we wouldn't ask for them. So you will typically, start, of course, with a cover letter, your CV, job market paper, references, and then there can be auxiliary documents such as research or teaching statements. So what I and other recruiters often start with is the CV. And that is the space where all information about you should be very easily identifiable. And at your stage of your career, the most important aspect is going to be your education so far, as well as your research. What kind of research have you done so far? What is the summary of your job market paper? Do you have any revisions or revise or resubmits? Do you have any publications? Make everything as easily to find as possible. Formatting and design of the CV is important, but it's not a design competition. So don't agonize over the font. It's just important for us that we can easily identify information among a pack of several hundred other applications. And the most important thing to focus on is kind of explain your research, make it easily identifiable in your CV. Then once I've looked at a CV, the next thing I'm looking for is the job market paper. does it capture my interest? Where do I judge it in terms of quality? Is it novel? What is the contribution? Is it well written? Is it kind of very well polished? And if I'm satisfied with kind of passing these hurdles in the job market paper, then I move on to the cover letter. And I know that there's a variety of opinions about cover letters, and I think you'll get a different answer of who you depending on who you ask. I always look at cover letters. For me, cover letter are an important document, and I'm looking out for information of whether the candidate is genuinely interested in joining us. So I personally wouldn't treat the cover letter as just as here's my application, have a look. I think it's the place where you can summarize your research, build your case of why you are a compelling candidate to join our department. So ideally, make some references to the place that you want to join, make some links to research groups in the department, business school, faculty, whatever, to show that you will fit in well and are going to be a good colleague. Then finally, I'm going to look at the references. Do the reference support my conclusion that I've drawn from the candidate? If yes, I might learn something new, both positively or negatively. And once I've reviewed the references, then I'm ready to make my conclusion to the full panel and support or not support this candidate. The research and teaching statements I think are often important at the interview stage, where we might have another look into getting an idea of how kind of future-proof the colleague is in terms of research career, trajectory, and teaching. And as Árpád said, we are delivering research and teaching. So this is kind of the documents where you can show that you have a pipeline of research as well as have a teaching concept behind you. And as you know, like most of you won't have a big teaching track record, but it's still your opportunity to demonstrate that you have a concept behind your teaching, your approach to teaching. So that is the application pack. Now, there was a question in the chat already about the length of the cover letter. I would say no longer than 2 pages for sure. So keep it at 2 pages maximum. Now, moving on to the flyout, there are, and I'm focusing this specifically on the UK, in that most places I know of have moved to kind of inviting a candidate for a full day visit, individual visit. There are still, I believe, some places that do group visits where you are together with several candidates. You're going to meet and see the other candidates. If that is the case, don't be disturbed by that. It is just kind of a function of how some places operate. So you are invited to a flyout. It might be an individual flyout. It might be with other candidates together. Then you will be asked to have a seminar that can be anything between 20 to 60 minutes plus. So I think something between 50 minutes to an hour is kind of common. And the most important bit there is probably at the beginning, that you need to capture the attention of the audience. So the introduction to your job market paper, to your research, is really, really critical. Focus on the contribution of your job market paper kind of throughout, from the introduction all the way to conclusion. What is it that you're doing well? What is it that you're adding on top, or you're doing novel things that haven't been in the literature yet? And as Árpád already said, prepare the presentation for economists, but non-specialists in your field. One other thing that I want to mention here is how to handle questions and the audience. So take all questions seriously, but it can happen that somebody starts a little bit of heckling and keeps coming back to a particular question and doesn't allow you to progress. So you are responsible for managing the audience and managing time. So always answer politely and friendly, and always take questions seriously, even if you've heard it many, many times before. But it's also fine at some point to say, thank you very much. This is a very important point. Could we please have a discussion of this after the talk? But I would like to move on with the talk to get through and finish my important other topics. So there's many more that can be said about the seminar, but I think that is kind of the essential bit, in that you have to stay calm, collected throughout, and manage the audience, keep within time. That's your responsibility. Now, briefly moving on to the interview, which is a UK speciality to have an interview at the flyout stage. So the pre-interviews, the job market interviews that we've discussed so far are not necessarily part of the formal recruitment process. That happens at the flyout, where most UK universities have to run an interview that follows specific HR criteria. And it's similar, but at the same time can be a little bit different to the econ job market interviews, in that it is a formal part. There will be a chair, typically the head of department or other people. I have often shared interviews myself. And my experience is a little bit different to what Apurav said, in that the first question that I often hear is, why are you interested in joining us? And many people stumble upon this question, which I find very interesting. So it's very important that you begin strong at the interview. So please be prepared to answer the question, why do you want to join us? Why are you interested? In a careful and considerate manner. So you have to do some research about the place, about the people, research groups, objectives, teaching curricula, etc., in order to give an informative question and not just say, I'm looking for a job, here I am. You have to give a good answer. So I took down some notes here of kind of what questions you can expect. So in addition to your research, it can be your contribution of co-authored papers, your funding, grant income plans, impact, teaching supervision, and yourself. Because as Árpád said, we are looking for the next colleague. And the final thing that I want to say, as part of the flyout, you will most likely meet faculty. You might be invited for dinner. So at some point, somebody from the faculty might say, don't worry, this is not part of the formal process. That is not strictly speaking true, because everything what you say and do and behave is part of the recruitment. So please behave professionally, courteously. When you meet faculty on one-on-ones, prepare, ask informed questions, and just demonstrate that you're going to be a good colleague, that you're going to be informed, that you are interested in joining the group, and then just have a good time and be yourself, and be kind and gentle and friendly, and have fun as well. That's very important. Have fun at the flyout.
Thank you, Joerg. That's very helpful. And of course, don't get drunk at the dinner. That's another kind of bottom line problem. Wonderful. So our final contributor this afternoon, our final kind of go through, is Martina Uccioli from the University of Nottingham. She's an assistant professor and received her PhD in economics from MIT, and I spent a postdoctoral year at IZA. So Martina's a labour economist interested in various aspects of gender gaps in labour institutions, and various associated really important questions that go along with that. And Martina's going to talk about how you should choose between different job offers, given that you're lucky enough to get more than one. So we hope that you all get several job offers, so that Martina's advice will be really helpful at that point. Martina, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Mary, for this very nice introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Martina Uccioli. I'm only going to talk about academic job offers, because that's the only thing I'm competent on. But of course, the world is wide, and you are great candidates, and the world outside academia is very ready and willing to hire you. So do not think carefully about whether academia is what you want to do or not. But let's suppose you have multiple academic job offers. How to choose between them? First of all, remember that you can negotiate. So offers are going to vary a lot on the conditions they give you, and also how much scope is there for negotiation, but there's nothing bad in asking. And the things you can generally negotiate on are money, teaching load, and research funds. The standards are very different. So for example, on average in the US, you will be offered higher salaries, but you will also be asked to teach more. In the UK, on average, you might get lower salaries, but you will, on average, get a lower teaching load. So bear in mind the standards might vary. But anyway, once you negotiate, make sure that anything that is given to you is sent to you in writing. At the negotiation stage, make sure to be professional. So do not make up offers that you don't have, because things come out in the profession. It's okay to say no to an offer. Nobody will hold it against you. Nobody will be upset if you do. What is not okay is to renege on offers that you have already accepted. That's a no-no that reflects very badly on you, on your advisors, on your institutions. So only accept an offer if you're very sure that you're gonna go there. Exploding offers, I know that there are some guidelines. So places should give you at least X number of days. I don't know what X is, but there are exploding offers, and that's because, you know, universities want to make sure that they hire someone. If you get an exploding offer, get in touch with the places you're still waiting to hear from, and you can ask for extensions. It's not granted that universities will give it to you, but you can ask. Then, how to choose? First, professional considerations. You want to work at a place where you're happy and you can be as productive as possible. What are the inputs in your productivity function? Your colleagues and the people you're going to interact with. So you want to maximize the probability of having high quality interaction. What does that mean? You want to look at your colleagues and think, are these people that I would be happy talking about research with? What are their field of specialization? They don't have to be in your narrow field. So for example, I'm a labor economist and I get a lot of research conversations with people in applied micro or in general. Are the senior people willing to mentor the junior? That's very important, because as you start in this career, first, there are many things you don't know and there are many things to navigate, and having someone more experienced that is willing to mentor you is very important. What's the quality of the seminars? So how good are the people that get invited? That's part of the process of trying to maximizing high quality interactions. Is there a PhD program? How good are the PhD students? Most likely those are the people that you're going to be supervising and that might become your co-authors. So that's also an aspect to keep in mind. Are people stressed? You know, some people might work very well in a high stress environment. Some people might work very well in a low stress environment. So that's something you can try to get a feel for when you go to the fly out and you start meeting your colleagues. Also, during the fly out, you will get a sense, but also during the fly out, you will be busy trying to impress the people you're talking to. So something you are very encouraged to is reach out to the people of the place after you have received an offer to have to try to get a better sense of how it would be to work there. And as has been said before, colleagues are not only the people you talk about research with, but they are also the people you meet in the corridors, you have lunch with. So try to get a sense of whether they would be nice people to go get a beer with. Another aspect is the department culture that people actually go to the office, or do people mostly work from home? And is that a good fit for you? And then finally, personal considerations. I read, I think on Twitter, this sentence that I think is very, makes a lot of sense, that a family can only be as happy as its least happy member. So when you think about whether you would be willing to move somewhere, think about whether your partner could find a job there. Think about whether you would be happy there. If you have kids, think about whether there are good schools there. So a lot of things to think about, but you know, if you are choosing between offers, it's an abundance problem, and so it's never a problem. I hope you will all have this problem.
Thank you very much, Martina. That's great. I think the single thing I would pick out from Martina's slides is don't even think of negotiating till you've got the offer. I often have questions from PhD students going on the job market is, you know, at what stage can I ask this question? if it's any kind of issue that might be negotiable, don't raise it at the interview, because the interview panel will start worrying about that, and you want that to be after the event. Okay, I think quite a lot of the questions have been picked up already and dealt with in the chats, but Árpád, I think you wanted to add in here something, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, I just very briefly, because I forgot to say one thing, and then Martina was emphasizing that she talks only about academic institutions. And as a macroeconomist, I wanted to add that there are, especially for macroeconomics, but to some extent to finance, applied, and all other fields, there are other jobs outside academia, which is in central banks especially, and in other research institutions. I wanted to add that to some extent what we said, most of it is exactly the same if you apply for the Bank of England, to the ECB, the IMF, the Federal Reserve. They are very similar. They are looking for creativity, they are looking for skills, they are looking for communication, they are not looking for teaching. But you don't have a lot of teaching experience anyway, so to some extent to prepare for those interviews is not that different. And the whole idea of what they are looking for is very similar. They are looking for very good economists in terms of skills, creativity, productivity, and communication. Sorry, I wanted to say that was missed from my presentation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that if you look at where economists get employed, economists are lucky because they have a lot more spaces where they get employed as economists, as opposed to something slightly different, across a range of public sector and private sector institutions, as well as think tanks. So I think it's a great position to be in, because you have lots of different possibilities. Is there, I don't know how many questions have been taken up in the chat, and whether any of the speakers would like to pick up any of the chat questions for elaboration. Can I make that as a suggestion, because I haven't been keeping up with the chat? Something, or is there a question that can be raised from the chat that I haven't quite kept up with them? Yeah, so I've mentioned these other possibilities, but I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, that these other vacancies have a standard place where you can find them. Is that correct? Maybe you have something you wanted to add to this.
I wasn't planning on saying something about that, but I can.
Okay,
I think
the
one that is probably the other relevant one is the JOE, the job openings for economists by the American Economics Association. That I believe would be the most relevant one for jobs worldwide. And then, as Apurav put in the chat, jobsac.uk specifically for UK jobs. Not just university jobs, but in academic settings in general.
Good. And you wanted to raise another point as well. So.
Yes, I wanted to kind of go back to something that I said in the presentation. There was a follow-up question in the chat about what I meant by funding income or grant income in the interview.
Yeah.
So in the UK, our research has to be often underpinned, or should be underpinned, through research income. So for example, if you have a particular research expense, for example, experimental costs, data acquisition costs, etc., these have to be funded, and they're often typically funded through external grants. Similarly, if you want to spend more time on your research, you need to kind of bring in money to the university so that they release you from other commitments. So at the interview stage, it can be beneficial to demonstrate that you are aware of this setting, and also potentially be able to give a response to the question of, have you thought about future grant income activities, or are you planning to apply for future grants? And then have an idea of what is available in the UK. And what would be most relevant is the ESRC, the Economics and Social Research Council, and there's specifically the New Investigators Grant, which is a scheme to fund around 3 years of your time and research expenses. So I think it won't be relevant for all of you, because not all research needs to be underpinned by funding, but I think demonstrating awareness of that can be quite important.
Yeah, thank you. And let me add to that, if you're thinking about looking into what is available, so you can at least mention something, the European Research Council has junior investigator grants. the Lever, in the context of the UK, both the Lever Hume and the BA do some junior grants. The BA ones are very nice 3-year ones, which is perhaps awkward to mention because you don't want to get given a job who then take 3 years leave. But just look around to find out what might be something you can say that you want to apply to. And that you don't have to have the grant, you just got to have some awareness that there's these possibilities. I also wanted to say something about the cover letter. I can't remember who it was who said that's really important. Wonderful. So my experience in my department is half the people in the department read the cover letter first and the other half read the CV first, right? And so even though you might think I've said everything already and it's all in the CV, no, please pay attention and do a good job on both, because half the people will start with one place and half to the other. And I think that's why you need to take them both. If they've read the cover letter, they won't pay so much attention to the CV and vice versa. So you need to do both. Árpád, you had something you wanted to add?
I let Apurav to contradict me. There was a question about the onion structure, and I wanted to say something about the onion structure, because I think the onion structure works very well in some interviews, and it doesn't work so well with another interviews. If you ever interview with Bristol, it doesn't work very well because we don't let you do another 3 minutes on the same topics. We are going to interrupt continuously. So I have a kind of some adjustment of that in my advice, but you can prepare both, by the way. That's the best. So what I tell my students, you need to have a 2-3 minutes version when people understand everything important about your paper, why you are doing, what you are doing, what do we learn, and what is the contribution. Because if you do that, then you can make it fully interactive. Then you say, do you want me to talk about calibration? Do you want me to talk about empirical results? And if they ask 10 questions about that, it's also okay, because they already know everything important about your paper. Because in Bristol, we really make it very interactive. There is no time to do a first 10 minutes ever. So you really need to be prepared for that. And you need to make sure. And I would like to emphasize what Apurav said is perfectly right. They might even interrupt in the first 2 minutes. Hopefully not much. Then you should answer politely and go back immediately to your spiel, because you want that 3 minutes. Your big picture should go through before you go to details. But you should answer. There is what is not good. Oh, I don't answer. Wait, I do it in 2 minutes. People are impatient. But you should answer and go back to track. But don't expect that you will have ever a 10 minutes in many of the, some interviews may have, but many of them, there is no 10-minute version. There is no time. There are many, and it's better if it's interactive, because you engage people and they ask questions. It's kind of a good interview when it's very interactive. Sorry, talk too much.
Okay. Thank you. No, thank you very much. Raphael, you have your hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, I just saw from the link that Joerg sent that this goes the job listings are between August 1st and January 31st, 2025. My question is, like, for example, the postdocs that are more like off cycle, that are later, and if some jobs don't clear, saying the bracket doesn't clear, so there's another website, or is it the same website, or is just more informal in this like off cycle postdocs? And
yeah, I think that's a difficult one, because these things aren't coordinated between postdocs and job markets, and the job market for some bits sometimes gets out of joint because there's a late resignation from somewhere and someone's looking late. Joerg, do you have advice on that one? You've got your hand up as a...
Apologies. Jobs.ac.uk, which is already listed in the chat, is typically where postdoc positions would be advertised to, and you can specifically create a search to email you whenever new positions show up for postdocs.
Yeah, but you know, you may find yourself in a little bit of difficulty and having to juggle a bit. So that's always a problem. Let me also add something else which came up about how you handle an awkward questioner in your job market seminar. Very good advice is to, of course, always be polite and always be serious. But if you're being really hassled by someone who wants to keep talking about the same thing, the same question again and again, and you are finding it difficult, then one way to help is to ask the chair. So turn to the chair of the seminar and say, look, I think I'd really like to try and get the main bit of the seminar out. Can I return to that question at the end? Get the chair on your side, because the chair probably wants the seminar to go ahead as well. So that's another way of kind of dealing with an awkward character who doesn't want to take your answer seriously. More questions or more answers from our panel about.
I want to go back to the onion structure. So I agree with everything that Árpád said. I think we are both aligned. And the onion structure exists so that if there are interruptions, at least you have conveyed what are the main points of your paper. And if there are no interruptions, you have this fallback option where you can slowly unpack what your paper is about. So that's why it exists. And interruptions are a great sign. If there are interruptions in your job market spiel, think of it as a very good sign that people are interested in your work. Unfortunately, that's how economics is. And if nobody interrupts you for 10 minutes when you're talking about a paper, it might not be a good sign. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Can I invite other questions or other comments from the panel? There's some questions there's some questions maybe in the chat that could come online. Martina.
I just would like to make a couple of points. One is with the cover letter, in which I agree that it's good to personalize them, but if you're applying to 200 places, it's unfeasible to personalize 200 letters. So cater the effort towards places that you think are particularly relevant for you. Do not try to write, I think, an essay for all of the hundreds of applications that you're gonna make, because otherwise you're just not gonna be able to make all of them. And I think for what concerns other materials, like, for example, like teaching statement, etc., if it is a position that is particularly looking for someone who's good at teaching, I think you can add your teaching statement, or that's a good place in which in your letter you can have your teaching paragraph. So in that case, you can personalize the letter in that way, emphasize it, like showing that you have read the post and you are responding to that post. Then it is different once you are invited for the flyout. I agree that once you go to a place, you must have done your research. You should have looked at the people there. You should know who you're gonna meet. But that's only gonna be done for the subset of places that are actually gonna invite you, because otherwise it becomes a little bit intense. And for what concerns the virtual interview, that varies a little bit between different places. So as far as I've understood, in the UK, it's the norm to have few people, like 3 or 4 people interviewing you. In other places, it might be many more people. So you could expect to open Zoom and find 20 people. Be ready for that. This is part of the advice of having your spiel perfectly ready, because you should prepare for opening Zoom and having 20 people in front of you. Sometimes it even happens that maybe they are all in the same room around the table looking at you at a screen, and that's a little bit terrifying. So make sure you know your pitch perfectly well, so that you're not taken aback even by this type of situations. And then the very last point, someone asked about, can you not negotiate at all during the flyout? My personal advice would be no. Like, don't even ask about salary. You will ask about salary when they make you an offer. At the flyout stage, it's not really that relevant. That's my opinion.
That's right. Yeah. Are there some points that came up in the chat that we have missed, in which someone would like to ask or answer? Árpád.
The last one is too long to answer by typing. So do recruiters prioritize job market candidates with publications over those with working papers, and single author versus not single author? So this is really tricky. I will start with the second part. Typically, what we do, if you have a co-author, we could have again, there are disagreements. If you have a co-author in current job market, especially in some fields like macro, is not a big harm. If you have a co-author who is much more senior, is your advisor or a full professor at your department, that's a disadvantage. That is because it's hard to disentangle your contribution to that paper to that one. But to have a junior co-author of your classmate 1 year below and above, that is much more accepted. It's at the margin, it's still a disadvantage, but only at the margin. In terms of publications versus potential, that is a difficult call. It depends on the publication, depends on the potential. So we look at carefully the research and the research agenda, and we make a judgment together as a school, as a department of how to say. So of course, if you have publication, it's always an advantage, but not a publication in any journal, of course. So that is kind of hard to answer generally. In Bristol, for example, a publication is not a requirement to be hired. It's a plus. I don't know the other, and I think that's typically true for the Russell Group universities, but I'm not sure it's kind of completely true everywhere.
Yeah. Any other comments on that issue?
Just want to add there that with respect to having publications, it really matters where you're applying for a job. So the hiring committee is trying to get a candidate who will be promoted to an associate professor position in the next 5-6 years. So they want to see if you will reach that potential or not. And if you have publications that can help you reach there, it's great. But it really depends where that publication is and if you're hitting the right ballpark or not. If a candidate already has an R&R from a top 5, then it's possible some universities will say this candidate is out of our reach and we will not invite them for an interview. But another university where they are eager to have such candidates, which are higher ranked universities, they might prioritize you. So it's all about the match between what your profile is and where you're applying and what the criteria for that university to get you is.
Yeah, that's wise advice. Let me add something to the issue of just before we finish. The interview panel in the UK context, where there's an interview panel, which isn't always the case in other contexts. Some universities, some departments will tell you who's on the panel, so it's always worth asking. So you can do a little bit of research on who those people are. Some panels will have a majority of people from the department, and some panels will have a balance of people in and out of the department. But in all of these kind of contacts, whether or not it's an actual interview or just a hiring panel inside the department, remember, you've got to convince more than one person, right? So it's not just that you only want to speak to one person, you're only in one field, but you've got to kind of think about gathering allies and think about who those might be, so that you don't just speak too narrowly about what you're doing and can find ways of bringing people together. I think various people have said that amongst the panel, but it is the case that, no panel hires just on one person's say-so, unless they're a pretty strange department. So think about that, that there's going to be a range of people, and it's not just one person to be persuaded, but allies have to be drawn across. I think I'm going to be drawing this to a close now. Maria's put the little feedback event slide up, and I think we've asked you to fill that in, the poll, so please do fill that in. I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's been a really effective use of an hour, I hope, because we've got through an awful lot of stuff, and I think we've mostly answered most of the questions. And I think the answer is, look, there's lots of important things. There's no one important thing. There's several things which are important, and there's going to be variety across the jobs you apply for. So be ready for a bit of flexibility in how you approach various departments and what they're interested in and where you're going to fit, because the important thing from both sides is to get a good fit, and that's what everybody is aiming for in this kind of market here. I'd particularly like to thank our speakers here, Árpád, Ábrahám, Martina, Uccioli, Joerg Weber and Apurav Bhatiya for sharing their experiences, because it is experience as much as anything else that's feeding in here from all of us. And it's been really valuable to have you, but even especially when you disagree about something, because the point is that departments do things slightly differently or very differently. And so what we've given you is a range of the things, a variety of the things that can happen. And I think that's probably one of the most important lessons is it isn't a simple rule-bound project here, and you need to be able to be flexible, because you'll find us all doing different things in different ways. So thank you very much for all of you coming. Thank you very much to our 4 speakers, and thank you for Maria and Georgina for setting this up. And the slides will be coming out to you if you've been participating. Is there anything else I ought to mention, Maria, if you're somewhere online here?
No, that was all. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Mary, for an excellent sharing. I will just add the link to the chat for the rest of the doctoral training program sessions. We would love to see you in one of the future ones. And if you've got any questions, you can find my email on that website, and we can take it from there.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. That training program is part of it's very new. So really do come and sign up and take part. Thank you very much, everyone. And that's it for our process here.